Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Intuitus webinar on exit readiness, where we'll be discussing aspects of the exit process which impact exit multiples and how best to prepare for that process. First of all, I'd like to introduce our panel for today's session. We have John Lowe, who is not only an Intuitus consultant, but is also a CTO with over 20 years of experience in leadership positions within organizations such as Microsoft, Accenture, and Sony. John supported Intuitus in delivering numerous technology due diligence projects over the last few years and is ideally positioned to share his views on exit readiness with us this afternoon. And there's myself, Jill Smith. I'm a business relationship manager with Intuitus, having been involved in over 100 due diligence projects to date and acting chair for today's session. So our agenda for today will cover the following. What is meant by exit readiness? I think it's good to start with setting expectations in terms of understanding what we really mean, the typical areas that will impact exit value, the process and what it entails, when is an ideal time to prepare, and the likely areas of investigation that you can plan for today. As we're aware, a successful exit process for private equity is largely about exit multiples and maximising the value, whilst for a portfolio company, it might be monetary value that's important, but surviving the process without impact to the business is also key. So what do we really mean by exit readiness? There's multiple ways to interpret this. So John, perhaps you can put some colour and context around this.
Sure, thanks Jill, and good afternoon everybody. I guess without oversimplifying it, it is one of those terms that says exactly what it is on the tin, which is preparing your business for exit. And I guess that's whether it's in a a sale in part, or a divestment, a carve out, a separation, a wholesale, or otherwise. It's getting things ready so that, as Jill said, you can get the best exit value. And what we mean by preparation covers largely two areas. Improving the areas that can affect the valuation, and in this regard, at Intuitus, we focus on things regarding technology and digital capability areas, so things such as technology applications and infrastructure, product and software development, data analytics, and so on. And then also creating opportunities for the next buyer, so the person that's coming in, to realize future value creation. So aligning the value story as well as to the business growth strategy, having a story of how digital and technology has enabled the business growth to date, and so that the company's in a great position, front to back, top down, to do so and continue delivering value in a cost-effective way. Now, I guess additionally, there's a couple of areas to call out when we think about readiness. And the first one is what we like to call keeping the trains running. And what we mean by that is areas around operational matters such as cybersecurity and technology hygiene areas, for want of a better phrase, so backups and disaster recovery and the like. And then the last kind of point is around making it a great place to work. This has become increasingly important with coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic. And the reason for calling this out here is because people are always paramount to any business. But just as employers now have the pick of a global talent pool, so does the best talent. They no longer need to work in an office in Leeds or London or Munich or wherever it might be. The smart people can choose exactly who they work for without any location constraints. So you need to make your business a great place to work so the best talent can come to work for you, you can retain them, and then as a whole business you can then attract the best, and then the next investor can benefit from that talent that you have, rather than what can be quite a large capital outlay, especially post-transaction, and people may move on and not like the future. There can be quite large capital outlay in a significant sum to acquire and go through the whole search and selection process to get the talent back into the business.
Thanks, John, for that clarity around what we mean. It's worth exploring, I think, typical areas then that would impact the exit value of a business on exit. And given, as you mentioned, the global impact of coronavirus on businesses and the varied responses to that impact, this surely should be factored into the considerations. And over the last couple of months, I've certainly seen a varied reaction with regards to the technology, where most of the successful businesses have pivoted their business model to focus on delivering services remotely. There's a number of aspects which can have either a positive or negative impact on exit value. John, what would be probably the top 5 areas we'd consider to impact exit value?
It's great. It's a great point, and I think I think COVID and coronavirus is in every single conversation recently, and it is an important backdrop certainly to this session here because it's something that's affecting every single business. So we're acutely aware that businesses today are facing the new challenges of what we call a new normal, and that's unpredictable, and to some degree it's even more unpredictable every single day. But what we can be sure of is that the world has transformed. It's moved on quite quickly, where working is now remote first. Everybody's geographically distributed somewhat by default now. It's a world where customers and clients are digital first. They're much more technology savvy. If we thought they were technology savvy before, they're even more technology savvy today and even more demanding. And it's a world where business decisions are made with even more speed and even more agility. So I guess what we've seen in the last few months is that a lot of businesses have adapted to this new normal just to survive rather than go out of business. So we've pivoted business models, or they've just completely put new processes and digital and technology in place. So they've moved at a speed which the executive board could probably never have imagined. This rapid acceleration of what we would typically call digital transformation plans that either hadn't been started or they weren't that far along. These have suddenly been put in place and accelerated, and businesses are realizing tangible results now from these. It's not just we've put something in place. They're actually seeing the benefits of some of these things from a value perspective. So we know that this isn't going to change, this new normal. Okay, we might go back to the office, might be some location specific needs, but we won't see this enormous pullback to how things were this time last year in how businesses operate with digital ways of working now, pretty much, as we said, digital by default. So for more businesses, it's about incrementally improving what they have. And the reason I've kind of mentioned that at the start of this is because there's a lot of businesses now that'll discover they have a significant amount of what we like to call debt. And that's because of the nature of the changes that they've implemented. So they may not have put the best plans in place. They've had to do what they needed to do to survive. There'll be bits and pieces that aren't really integrated as well as they could have been. Code might not be written as well as it could have been. So there's a lot of new debt that maybe needs to be cleared, and that might be in addition to old debt, or it might replace previous debt. But by and large, it's debt, and we can kind of think about it around 3 areas. We've got the kind of one which many people know about, which is technology debt. So that's the cost or the price of the kind of rework that's required to remediate issues due to choosing a potentially easy and quite limited solution. And that usually arises when speed's a key factor. So we'll see, we've seen more of that in recent months. You need to do something quick, it works. You don't obviously want to sacrifice quality and security, but it might not be as scalable or as simple to maintain. As we said previously, some poor integration methods maybe, and maybe some manual processes, some architecture patterns that kind of just work rather than the best one, might be some code monoliths, lots of things, might be some more outdated vendor software. So there'd be some more technology debt, and of course that always impacts exit value because it's work that needs to be done in the future by the next investor. Second one is around knowledge debt. So this is where knowledge hasn't been captured to the extent where there's a reliance on people, and then a risk of that knowledge retention. So the people leaving the building with that knowledge. So there's things that are poorly documented, missing source code, or just 2 examples maybe there. And this is also where from an exit value perspective, if people have conflicting views, as an investor looking on the buy side, you want a single point of truth. You want to make sure that that everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet. And if one person at a senior level is saying a different story of how things operate and how technology works, or head scratching and so on, doesn't really give you a lot of confidence in that that what you're hearing is correct. And then going back to coronavirus, there'll be instances where businesses have recruited contractors, for 6 months to just get in there and do something, and then those people have disappeared. So that leads to a kind of knowledge and maybe technology debt part there. And then the third one is around cultural debt. So the way things are done around here. Typically, the way the business operates, the way they manage customers and their expectations, the ways of working. Now, of course, like a lot of things, this starts at the top. So how is the executive board evangelizing a kind of customer-centric, digital-first, remote-first culture? And that extends into using technology to drive innovation, a learn-fast culture of experimentation, all to improve a competitive advantage. So there can be a cultural debt where the top it's kind of a head in the sand, which is, we don't need to change, these things aren't, affecting us. And the last point to raise at this particular part is around leadership. We mentioned about talent previously, and a lack of strong leadership can certainly impact exit value. And what I mean is that, are the leaders in place? Have we got the people in place that can realise all the great stuff we've seen about the future growth strategy and where value is going to come from? So making the business a great place to work kind of works hand in hand with that, because there's this huge battleground for skills right now. Can these leaders attract the right people with the right skills to deliver this growth strategy? So equally, depending on the investment situation, investors will want to make sure that they can work with these people as well. You're going to be with them for 2, 3, 4, maybe years. Are these leaders that we can work with and have a good rapport with and a good working relationship with during the period of time that we have? One area which isn't here on the slide, but one to mention, is around data. We all know data is, driving decision making and advanced analytics, AI, machine learning, natural linguistic programming, and so on. That can impact certainly valuation depending upon the business, and we expect more and more that'll become much more critical. And it's much, it's across all the areas of the business. It isn't just the technology, it's process, it's people, it's strategy, and that is certainly something that could be a potential value drag in the future. And I guess if we did this webinar in 12 months' time, it would certainly be one at the top, because pretty much all businesses today can gain a competitive advantage in some shape or form through great use of data and all the insights that can be derived from that.
I think they're all excellent points, John, and actually pretty much most of that is something that a diligence provider would cover off for all the reasons that you mentioned. It's important to address these from the perspective of a portfolio company and a PE firm, because they can represent cost to the next investor, or as you say, hurdles to overcome in terms of scalability and growth, or even potential risk. So what does the process involve from a technology and digital perspective? It's probably worth spending a little bit of time on this slide talking you through what that process looks like. Understanding the exit strategy and the timescales involved sets the framework within which you need to operate and drives the activity timelines. It also sets the scene for the desired outcome, what and by when. And it's important to assess the current status of the organisation to understand what that gap might look like. It could be achieved by carrying out a formal capability assessment, and once this has been done, the organisation is in a better position to craft a strategy to span that gap, and then work back from the end goal to create a high-level plan with milestones and dates for achieving. For some organisations, that might mean a form of transformation programme and might involve external assistance depending on the skills and bandwidth available within the company at the time. As John mentioned earlier, it's key to ensure this preparation journey addresses the technology debt, the knowledge debt, culture change, capabilities within the organisation, and that all of that's documented. Any assessment, strategy, roadmap should be documented at the time, because as John's mentioned, these documents form part of the diligence process, and they'll show clear planning and forethought in the eyes of the next investor. It'll also make it easier to explain during the exit diligence process and lessen the need for in-depth interrogation. And with that in mind, it's wise to move to perform another checkpoint assessment partway through the journey to exit. And that can be halfway, 2/3, at any point that you feel significant progress has been made. And it's particularly helpful to the organisation in understanding the progress that has been made and the current trajectory towards their own exit status. It provides an opportunity to tweak the plan and to be realistic about what can still be achieved and which will deliver a return on investment, and some of the things that might be worth leaving but documenting for the next investor to benefit from. Creating and highlighting opportunity and value levers still to be pulled can be attractive for the next investor and should certainly be taken into consideration. Conducting a readiness assessment is also an excellent way of preparing for the exit process itself, because the team will then be prepared for the type of investigation they'll come under and have a solid story to tell. And their confidence in telling that story will grow as time passes. And the final stage of the process would be to top up that assessment with a sell-side due diligence report. This not only allows the organisation to highlight their own selling points, but demonstrate to the potential next investor a level of maturity and self-awareness in the leadership team. And as John mentioned earlier, confidence in the leadership team is every bit as important as the documentation and the strategy. It builds confidence and trust. And I certainly know from experience, this is where a process can either go really well or completely fall off the rails for a firm. Unanswered questions and lack of documentation simply leads to more questions and generates doubt and uncertainty in the mind of the investors. So bearing all this in mind, when would be the ideal time to start preparing for exit? And I think it sounds a little bit trite, but as soon as possible is the answer, always. It's never too early. Having said that, we know real life gets in the way, and day-to-day running of a business can sometimes distract a team from planning the future. And it's hard to embrace change, and it means a mindset shift as well as changes in technology and working practices. And we've mentioned a few times now, documentation is key. It'll save everyone a lot of time and it'll save on pressure. We know that the sale process can become compressed and stressful as a result. Having a clear documented strategy and a story explaining the gaps will increase the chances of a smooth and successful exit. Some of our clients start planning the process at the point of investment and they map it out from there over the intended holding period. We've experienced some great exits where organisations have prepared throughout the holding period and the exit multiple surpassed expectation. Conversely, we've experienced some where the exit wasn't really all that well planned, and in fact, the sales process actually collapsed, which is a situation clearly you want to avoid. John, what's the likely areas of investigation that can be planned for from the start, do you think?
Well, I think first of all is just to underscore what you said there, Jill, about today, what can be planned for today. I think it's a quote from the film Benjamin Button, isn't it, where they said it's never too late or too early. And in this case, to start your exit readiness, start as soon as you can, I think is my recommendation. There's many areas you can look at today and implement today, but if you want some kind of order, let's say, it's best looking at it from the eyes of an investor. Like a lot of situations in life, look at what can you do if you were the investor looking at your business or a buy side advisor. What are the things that you think they would kind of scratch their heads around or want to dig deeper into? And I think first of all, it's probably around strategy and roadmap, so areas in digital and product and technology, making sure that these are all connected together and to some extent cascade up to the business growth strategy, so that you can actually see how the value will be created, and then equally important, how you can reduce the cost of creating that value. And also, just going back to the previous slide, there's kind of a key alignment required in that as well, because what you can often find, and maybe particularly towards the end of a kind of hold period, is small disconnect, let's say, between a business growth strategy and the exit strategy. So, what capital is to be invested at a certain point within that investment time frame. There might be an area of capital that needs to be invested, and the current investors don't really want to invest so much at that point in time. So it's making sure that there is a joined up story there between the business growth strategy and the value strategy and the exit strategy, and then of course the digital technology, product, data and so on strategies beneath that, all on the same page and being in lockstep. And I think if we talk about what a great strategy looks like from our side, it's one of those which it isn't this huge tome, it's not a huge single document, it's something that describes the challenges and the root causes of those challenges, offers some solutions to those challenges, and then some specific actions to address those challenges, kind of as simple as that, let's say. And it's, of course, from my side of the table, it's always the specific actions that are most exciting parts, the things that are you going to do, the kind of putting the strategy in place. So it can be a visual representation, a one-page vision. I think it was JFK that had his, we go to the moon type vision. that's one of the important things in all of this. It could be a roadmap of projects or work streams that are in a tool such as Jira. It's making sure that those strategy and roadmaps are very crystal clear on how value will be created or removed, or cost will be removed from a business. Second area is around, we spoke about technology debt, and it's how do we turn technology debt into, let's call it technology equity. So making sure that time is allocated to incrementally removing debt as you go. So, you know, people might use phraseology like, you know, if you're in kind of catering, you know, clean as you go, let's say. Here it's all about, you know, removing debt as you go. So as you kind of, if you're in development, in software development, you're looking to rewrite or refactor as you go. You're leaving it better than you found it. You're evangelizing principles, you know, such as understanding how much time is spent during development, so you can see how much time is spent on bad code and understanding the code and all these obstacles to maintainability. So making sure that you're not just leaving debt and putting it away and thinking, okay, we don't need to touch this, actually turning it into something that you can turn into your advantage and improve your exit valuation. On the cultural side of things, we mentioned cultural debt earlier, and certainly making sure that it's not just about customer centricity, it's about empowering your employees and being partner centric as well. So, you know, that's just reaching out and asking them, you know, what do they need, not trying to guess what they need and delivering something that is never used, finding out what customers need, finding out what employees need, finding out what partners need, and then making sure that what you're delivering, and that all leads into your strategy and roadmaps, is something that they can use. You know, of course, a kind of great digital business is one that you would invest in is one that can delight the customers, empower the employees, and then creates flywheels. You're like flywheels when, you know, we're looking on the investment side, looking at a flywheel within the business of, you know, how do they delight the customers, turn those customers into repeat visitors, reducing your customer acquisition costs and increasing your lifetime customer value. Are you doing things in there that are just these, you know, these value creation wheels that are just in place, that are customers are becoming your kind of best advocates? Another areas around, and kind of works hand in hand with that, is delivering value needs, of course, speed and automation. So introducing, you know, various tools or techniques, whatever it might be, but overall a kind of technology ecosystem and digital ways of working that embraces the cloud, enables your business to move very swiftly from idea to market as quickly as possible, with security and quality kind of baked in, so that the competitive advantage can be realized as soon as possible. So taking advantage, and, you know, like talking too technical, advantages of things like containerization, microservices, DevOps, or even DevSecOps as a culture and practices, put in some of these things which, you know, maybe 2-3 years ago were quite bleeding edge technologies and principles, things which right now, if you were starting a business from scratch and a blank sheet of paper, principles that you would certainly put in place right now. You know, the reason we talk about this is, going back to earlier, pace of change is just completely unrelenting. We're not going back to where we were maybe some months ago, and this is only getting quicker. So your time to market really needs to keep up with that, and it's certainly on the buy side. If you're saying, you know, it takes 6 months to release a new feature, and we've got to release all the code, it's something that, you know, somebody would look at and say, well, you know, how's that going to maintain a competitive advantage? And then keeping on top of operations, keeping the trains running. If there's areas of technology hygiene, improve those as soon as you can. It's you know, one of the things that we'd look at on the buy side. Where are these banana skins? Where are the areas of downside risk that, you know, we're just down to not keeping on top of some of the operations? So we see lots of businesses still that you know, have insufficient cybersecurity practices in place, and this is more so with people. You can put the best tools and practices in place, but fundamentally, you know, the biggest issue to security is people. That's the biggest weakest point. So not having the right kind of measures in place to remove that particular security vector, threat vector. And then similar with data backups and disaster recovery, cloud computing's made these much easier and cheaper to implement. So making sure those are managed. And then one area we mentioned earlier is documentation. And kind of to bring this kind of area to a conclusion, it's probably the area which is the most important to start, but it's probably the area which is least likely to start. It's the job that nobody really likes to do, but the diligence process, whether it's on a technology side, a digital side, a legal side, a commercial side, all relies upon documentation. And when you're looking at exit and then going into sale, it's much smoother if you've got the documentation in place rather than scrambling around getting your documentation in place to the depth and the quality that's required. It's certainly not something you want to be doing a few days before diligence is about to begin. And as Jill said, when you've got kind of a day job to do as well. So it's best to get into the habits and practices now. We all know how long it takes to kind of adopt a new habit or a new practice, such as annotating code or implementing a tool that facilitates documentation. I think if there's one single most thing I would say start today if you don't do it today, is documentation.
Thanks, John. Really sound advice, and comes from many years of due diligence processes of varying outcomes, I have no doubt. I think at this point it's probably worth revisiting the key takeaways from today's webinar session. John, would you like to do a recap for us?
Sure, and it's just to bring it all into conclude. Define the exit vision and strategy, show that value creation path, make sure that you can clearly articulate the kind of path that you've taken, and how technology and the area where we work, technology and digital, has enabled that, and how that path will continue to grow. There's not these big boulders and obstacles in the way. It's a natural succession, and another investor is just coming in, picking this up again and continuing that value creation path, and then aligning the strategies to the exit strategy as well as any business growth strategy, keeping on top of the operational areas we've mentioned, doing all that upfront work, and cannot underscore it, triple underscore, that can really boost the chance of a successful exit. And it's never too early to start. Don't be afraid of saying, we need to start today. Start today, and it's something that'll be one of the best decisions you make.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say start as early as possible, as you said, and start with the end in mind. That about wraps it up for today's session on exit readiness. John, thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening. We hope you found it useful. If you want to discuss any aspect in more detail, please feel free to get in touch afterwards, and my contact details are here on this last slide on the screen just now. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.